I never imagined that a day meant for routine neighborhood maintenance could spiral into an all-out showdown with a twist that would leave everyone stunned. It began on an unusually quiet morning in the upscale suburb of Oakwood Hills. The crisp air carried whispers of early autumn as I sipped my coffee and prepared for another day of work at the local field office of Homeland Security. Little did I know that the very community I called home was about to turn against me. That morning, as I was leaving for work, I noticed an unusual commotion by my front gate. A cluster of cops, or so they claimed, were milling about my driveway. Their uniforms looked off, and their badges, though present, seemed suspiciously fake. Before I could process what was happening, one of them approached and barked, "You're under arrest." I froze. How could this be? I had done nothing wrong. In a matter of seconds, my mind raced back to all those tense HOA meetings and endless complaints that I'd been receiving about supposed disturbances on my property. I had always prided myself on being a model resident, even as I juggled a demanding job at Homeland Security, a fact that, apparently, had slipped everyone's mind. The fake officers attempted to cuff me outside my own home. Neighbors began gathering, their phones recording the spectacle. I tried to reason with them, explaining that I worked in Homeland Security, but they dismissed my words as mere bluster. The entire scene had the surreal quality of a bad movie. Here I was being arrested by a phony squad sent by the very HOA I had helped fund with my taxes. The injustice was palpable, and it stoked a fire inside me. As I struggled to free myself from the clutches of these imposters, a moment of clarity emerged. I realized that this wasn't just about a personal vendetta or some bureaucratic error. It was a deliberate attempt by the HOA to intimidate me. And as the fake cops prattled on about neighborhood violations, I knew I had to flip the script. Today, I would show them that you can't mess with someone who's part of the very system designed to protect us. With adrenaline coursing through my veins and a steely resolve forming, I prepared to expose their charade and remind everyone why I was never to be underestimated. Oakwood Hills was the epitome of suburban perfection, a haven of pristine lawns, uniform houses, and an active homeowners association, HOA, that ruled with an iron fist. Every resident was expected to abide by strict guidelines, and any deviation, no matter how trivial, was met with swift retribution. Neighbors took pride in their well-kept properties and in the community's reputation for order. It was a place where every detail was scrutinized and where even the slightest misstep could spark a scandal. I had lived in Oakwood Hills for nearly a decade, working in a local field office of Homeland Security, a job that demanded integrity, vigilance, and the utmost professionalism. While I enjoyed the calm routine of suburban life, I had also grown weary of the constant petty disputes and the overzealous interventions by some residents. Foremost among these was Karen Ellison, known by many as HOA Karen. In her early 50s, Karen prided herself on being the ultimate enforcer of community standards. With her impeccably tailored suits, perfectly styled hair, and a smartphone always at the ready, she took every opportunity to report what she deemed irregularities in our neighborhood, from minor noise complaints to poorly arranged lawn ornaments. Karen's zeal had earned her a reputation that was both respected and resented. To some, she was the guardian of Oakwood Hills' pristine image. To others, she was an overbearing bully who let her self-righteousness cloud her judgment. Over the years, she had amassed a long list of complaints against neighbors, and her reports were taken seriously by the HOA board, until, that is, they turned against me. Unlike Karen, I believe in a more balanced approach to community living. I valued independence and personal freedom, and I was known for my calm demeanor and pragmatic problem-solving skills. My work at Homeland Security wasn't just a job. It was a commitment to protecting our country and ensuring that justice prevailed. I had earned respect for my integrity and dedication, even if it sometimes set me at odds with the more petty-minded residents of Oakwood Hills. The setting was ripe for conflict. Our neighborhood, with its immaculate sidewalks, sparkling windows, and perfectly trimmed hedges, was the kind of place where every action was under a microscope. It was in this environment that the HOA wielded its power, sometimes excessively, enforcing rules that, in my opinion, bordered on the absurd. When Karen's latest stunt unfolded, the stage was set for a dramatic confrontation between a woman who thrived on petty control and a man whose background in Homeland Security had taught him that truth and accountability always prevail. On that fateful morning, as I prepared for another day at work, I could sense that something was off. The usual quiet of Oakwood Hills had been disrupted by the sight of uniformed cops outside my door. The tension was thick as I took in the scene. A group of individuals claiming authority, their badges and uniforms looking oddly inconsistent. Little did they know, I wasn't just any resident. I was someone who understood real authority, and I was about to make sure everyone did, too. The chaos unfolded quickly. Within moments of the fake cops surrounding my house, I tried to explain that I work for Homeland Security, but they brushed off my protest as mere bravado. Karen's voice echoed in my ears as she proclaimed to a gathered crowd, "We must keep our neighborhood safe from those who break the rules." It was as if she had orchestrated the entire charade with the intent of sending a message that no one was above her petty authority. I could see the confusion on the faces of the fake officers. Their uniforms were clearly off, their badges lacking the authenticity of real law enforcement. I knew then that this was not a legitimate arrest. It was a setup by the HOA, a ploy designed to intimidate me and silence any dissent against their draconian measures. My mind raced as I quickly scanned the scene. Neighbors whispered, some recording the spectacle with their smartphones. The audacity of it all, my own home, targeted by these imposters, while Karen Ellison presided over the operation like a self-appointed sheriff of Oakwood Hills. Determined not to be cowed by this blatant abuse of power, I steeled myself. I recalled every instance when Karen's reports had led to unnecessary interventions against those she deemed undeserving. Today, I would show her that real authority wasn't something that could be faked. I stepped forward, my heart pounding, and calmly but firmly stated, "I work for Homeland Security, and these aren't real officers." My voice rang out, carrying the weight of both truth and experience. For a moment, the scene froze in disbelief. The fake officers exchanged uncertain glances as whispers spread among the onlookers. Some neighbors began to murmur in support, their expressions shifting from shock to admiration. It was clear that my words had struck a chord, and the reality of the situation started to overturn the carefully constructed narrative that Karen had set up. But Karen was not about to let her carefully curated image crumble so easily. With a defiant glare, she retorted, "You're just trying to cover up your own mistakes." Her tone was aggressive, laced with the kind of venom that came from years of wielding unchecked power. I knew then that this confrontation was not just about me or even about the HOA. It was about the very essence of authority and the right to live without harassment. As the confrontation escalated, I called on my phone to record the incident, ensuring that every moment was captured as evidence. The digital record would later prove invaluable as the story spread like wildfire online. Neighbors, now fully engaged, began to rally around me. Social media posts with hashtags like #RealAuthority and #HO harassment soon emerged, galvanizing public opinion against the absurd actions of the HOA. The tension was palpable. The fake officers, now caught in a web of their own deception, fumbled with their responses. Karen's once commanding tone began to waver as more and more residents sided with me, recognizing that the incident was not about community safety, but about the misuse of power for personal vendettas. Every whispered comment, every shared video clip, built a case that exposed not only the fraudulent nature of the arrest, but also the deep-seated bias that had driven it. I could see the shift in the crowd's mood, from tentative support to a full-blown demand for accountability. The conflict had grown far beyond the boundaries of my own front yard. It had become a symbol of resistance against arbitrary authority. And as the digital evidence continued to accumulate, it was clear that the community would not let this injustice slide. In the days that followed the incident, Oakwood Hills was transformed by the storm of public outrage. Social media exploded with posts and hashtags, such as #HO harassment, #RealAuthority, and hashtag Justice for Oakwood, as residents who had long suffered under arbitrary enforcement began to voice their frustrations. The video of me confronting the fake cops and boldly declaring my Homeland Security background went viral, and soon the entire neighborhood was abuzz with discussions about the limits of HOA power. Local news stations picked up the story, broadcasting live segments from the scene and interviewing residents who expressed disbelief that an HOA could resort to sending fake police officers to arrest a homeowner. "This is not how a civilized community operates," one reporter exclaimed on air as footage of the confrontation was replayed. The narrative shifted rapidly. What had begun as a petty power play by HOA Karen was now a symbol of abuse of authority and a call for accountability. At a special town hall meeting convened by concerned residents, tensions reached a boiling point. Neighbors, some long intimidated by Karen's strict enforcement, and others who had grown tired of the constant micromanagement, gathered to demand a change. "We deserve to live in a community where our rights are respected," one impassioned speaker declared, her voice echoing through the packed auditorium. The meeting quickly devolved into heated debates, with voices raised in anger and determination. Many residents recounted previous instances of HOA overreach, and a consensus began to form that something had to be done to rein in the unchecked power of the board and its self-appointed enforcer, Karen. Behind the scenes, the HOA board scrambled to defend itself. Internal meetings revealed that Karen's actions were not isolated. They were part of a pattern that had long been tolerated because of her deep connections within the board. But now, with digital evidence and the unanimous support of the community, those defenses began to crumble. Several board members, once loyal to Karen, expressed concerns about the long-term implications of allowing such behavior to go unchecked. "If we continue to support these arbitrary actions, we risk eroding the trust of every resident in Oakwood Hills," one member stated in a closed meeting. Meanwhile, the local police department, which had initially been caught off guard by the fake arrest, issued a statement condemning the misuse of law enforcement imagery and tactics by private organizations. Officer Aaron Lewis, who had witnessed the confrontation firsthand, remarked, "Our duty is to serve and protect all citizens. When public authority is misrepresented for personal vendettas, it undermines the very principles we stand for." His measured tone resonated with both the authorities and the public, adding credibility to the growing movement for reform. As the investigation unfolded, digital evidence collected from my phone, security cameras, and multiple eyewitness accounts formed an unassailable record of the incident. Neighbors posted video clips online, and local bloggers wrote passionately about the need to curb HOA abuses. The digital trail not only exposed the fraudulent nature of the arrest, but also painted a stark picture of the systemic issues within our community, a system where personal bias could be weaponized against unsuspecting homeowners. The mounting pressure forced a series of emergency meetings by the HOA board. Under intense scrutiny from residents and local officials, the board finally acknowledged that they had overstepped their bounds. Proposals were made to overhaul the complaint process, and some members even suggested the dismissal of those responsible for orchestrating the fake arrest. The call for accountability became a rallying cry for the entire community. "This is our chance to reclaim our neighborhood," one resident declared passionately during a heated board meeting. Amidst this rising tide of public outcry, I received messages of support from across Oakwood Hills and even from neighboring communities. People celebrated my bold stand against injustice, and the phrase, "You can't fake real authority," began to circulate as a testament to our collective determination. The incident had morphed from a personal battle into a broader movement, a movement demanding that no one should be allowed to misuse public resources to impose their will on others. By the end of the week, it was clear that the incident had irrevocably altered the fabric of Oakwood Hills. The digital evidence had not only exposed the misuse of power, but had ignited a firestorm of calls for reform. The once fearsome figure of HOA, Karen, was now being held accountable by a united community determined to uphold fairness and transparency. Every shared video, every hashtag, and every impassioned post reinforced the message that public authority, when wielded for personal vendettas, would face the full force of community accountability. The decisive moment arrived on a crisp morning in a packed boardroom at the Oakwood Hills Community Center. The room was filled with HOA officials, local police representatives, community leaders, and residents, all gathered to hear the final resolution of the investigation into the fake arrest incident orchestrated by HOA Karen. With calm authority, Councilwoman Linda Morales stepped up to the podium, her eyes scanning the expectant crowd. After a thorough review of all digital evidence, surveillance footage, and eyewitness testimonies, we have reached an inescapable conclusion. Councilwoman Morales began, her voice steady and resolute. It is evident that the actions taken by Mrs. Karen Simmons, specifically the deployment of fake law enforcement to intimidate a resident, were not only baseless but driven by personal bias and a gross abuse of power. Such actions are an affront to the very principles of fairness and justice that our community holds dear. A heavy silence fell over the room as Morales continued. Effective immediately, Mrs. Simmons's record of unwarranted complaints and intrusive behavior will be subjected to a full disciplinary review. Furthermore, the HOA board has resolved to implement new safeguards to ensure that public resources and community authority are never again misused to further personal vendettas. Her declaration sent ripples through the room, and every face reflected a mix of relief and determination. At that moment, a respected community representative, a longtime advocate for transparency and accountability, rose to speak. "Today, we stand together as one community," he proclaimed, his voice firm and impassioned. "We will no longer tolerate the abuse of power, no matter who wields it. Our neighborhood must be a sanctuary for all residents, free from arbitrary interference. Let this be the turning point where accountability is not just an ideal, but a reality." His words were met with thunderous applause, affirming the community's collective resolve. Following this, a senior police official presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of digital evidence, internal logs, and multiple eyewitness accounts that left no room for doubt. The dossier clearly documented that my peaceful existence and lawful behavior were the target of an orchestrated act of harassment, while every instance of Mrs. Simmons's actions was supported by incontrovertible evidence. The Internal Affairs panel had unanimously endorsed strict disciplinary measures, and the full report was scheduled for public release to ensure complete transparency. Councilwoman Morales concluded, "Let this resolution mark the dawn of a new era for Oakwood Hills, a community where every resident's rights are respected and where the misuse of authority will be met with swift, decisive action. Today, we reaffirm our commitment to justice and to the principles that bind us together as a community." Her final words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point that would forever change the landscape of our neighborhood. In that defining moment, as every face in the boardroom reflected shock, determination, and hope, the balance of power shifted irreversibly. The evidence was undeniable, and the collective call for accountability had been answered. The turning point was clear. No one, regardless of their self-appointed authority, would be allowed to abuse public trust, and the community of Oakwood Hills was ready to embrace a future built on fairness and respect. In the weeks that followed the landmark resolution, Oakwood Hills began a steady transformation. News of the disciplinary review against Karen Simmons and the subsequent eviction proceedings spread rapidly throughout local media and on social networks, sparking widespread discussions about accountability, fairness, and the proper use of community power. Town hall meetings and community forums saw unprecedented attendance as residents gathered to share their experiences and demand lasting reforms. Editorials in the local newspaper with headlines like "A New Dawn for Oakwood Hills" and "Community United Against Abuse" praised the decisive action taken by the HOA and local authorities. Hashtags such as #JusticeForOakwood and #NoMoreAbuse flooded social media, reinforcing the message that public authority, when misused, would be held accountable. Within the HOA board and the local police department, sweeping reforms were rapidly set in motion. Senior officials, led by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, introduced comprehensive training programs on cultural sensitivity, ethical conduct, and the responsible management of community resources. Regular internal audits and a transparent disciplinary process were instituted, ensuring that every complaint would be scrutinized and that trust would be restored. Our community's integrity depends on our ability to hold each other accountable, Lieutenant Reed stated in a follow-up press conference, reaffirming the renewed commitment to fairness. Community leaders and civil rights organizations mobilized to ensure that the lessons of the incident would lead to lasting change. Workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns were launched to promote awareness about individual rights and to foster a culture of mutual respect. We must work together to build a community where every voice is heard and every act of bias is challenged, one local activist declared passionately during a town hall meeting. For me, the journey from outrage to resolution was both personal and transformative. My bold stand against the fake arrest, backed by my real Homeland Security credentials, had not only defended my rights, but had also ignited a movement for accountability throughout Oakwood Hills. Neighbors who had once been silent now shared their own stories of unfair treatment, and together, we forge a united front demanding that no one be allowed to misuse community power for personal vendettas. Karen Simmons, facing the overwhelming weight of digital evidence and community disapproval, became a cautionary tale. Digital archives of her past infractions emerged, and many residents, once loyal to her rigid enforcement, now distanced themselves. Her actions were widely condemned as an abuse of authority, a stark reminder that unchecked bias ultimately leads to isolation and loss of credibility. At a final celebratory event held in the Central Park of Oakwood Hills, residents, local officials, and law enforcement representatives gathered under the warm glow of a setting sun. A large banner reading, "Unity, Justice, and Accountability," was unfurled between majestic oak trees, and heartfelt speeches resonated with messages of hope and renewal. Today, we celebrate a victory for every resident who has ever felt marginalized by abuse of power, Councilwoman Morales proclaimed, her voice ringing with determination. The applause that followed was a powerful affirmation that our community was ready to embrace a future where every voice was respected. As each new day dawned over Oakwood Hills, the legacy of that fateful incident endured as a beacon of transformative change. The story of how a fraudulent 911 call and a fake arrest were exposed by the truth, and how I, with my Homeland Security background, turned the tables, became a rallying cry for justice. It reminded everyone that when a community stands together, no abuse of power can remain unchecked. With every sunrise, the promise of fairness grew stronger, ensuring that our neighborhood would forever be a place where accountability and respect prevailed. In the end, what began as a personal struggle against overreach transformed into a movement that reshaped Oakwood Hills. We emerged more united, more vigilant, and more determined to build a community where real authority was defined by truth and integrity, and where no one, not even a self-appointed enforcer, could abuse that trust.